Hi, I'm Annie Weisbrod with the Shine Yoga Teachers Collective in Cincinnati. Today's class is on your sacrum and hip joints, so a lot of work down here today. First, a disclaimer that this video does not offer medical advice. Please stop any activity that causes difficulty breathing or pain. If that happens and persists even after you've stopped the exercise, please seek medical attention. So first off, let's find where the hip joints are. Obviously there's one on your right, one on your left. So I'm gonna have you place weight onto your left foot, and we're just gonna swing the right leg a bit. You can put your fingers on the ASIS point of the hip right here. So it's a little bone, you'll feel a knob there, and put your thumb behind. So just swing the leg a little bit. And at the top of the femur bone where it connects into the pelvis, that's more or less where we're looking. This space between your fingers, you bring your mind's eye to the inside between those two fingers, and it's going to be around there. That's about where your hip joint is. Go ahead, try it on the other foot. So weight on the right leg, fingers on the ASIS point of the hip, thumb in the back, and just swing the leg and see if you can feel, using your proprioception, your mind's eye, to feel the position of the leg and the position of where the femur bone of your thigh connects into the hip socket. That's your joint. Okay, so right hip joint, left hip joint, and then your sacrum is in the middle. So from the spine down, you'll find the triangular bone right about here. It feels flat. So this section right here, where the sacrum fits into the iliac crest of your pelvis, here. So the sacral iliac joint, SI joint, is right here. So we're going to work across the sacrum, sacral iliac joint here, and then into the joints of the hips where the femur bone connects in. So these three places. So as we move today, this is the area that we're stretching, and we're going to put our mind's eye in this area. One important thing for the Empowered Yoga students to be aware of is that this area of the body is very active energetically. So for those of you that have studied chakras, the Muladhara chakra at the base of the sacrum, so the front side of the sacrum, and Svadhisthana near reproductive organs and bladder, that's all here in this area. So as we put our mind's eye into the joints, but also into this chakral area, those spirals, you may notice some changes, things that people may experience, heat or coolness. Sometimes there's pictures, some people see colors. There's a whole variety of sensations that you may experience. Don't be surprised, and also don't be worried if you sense any of those things, but also don't be worried if you don't. Some people do not have those sorts of awarenesses early in their practice or even later in their practice. For example, I don't see colors very well at this point, but I have a lot of sensations, but I have students who have been practicing only a few months who see vibrant colors. So totally up to your body and how it interprets what it experiences here. The other thing to point out is that this area of the body within the hip joints themselves can be a place where we do store some memories related to trauma. So if you have a sensation, an emotion related to anger or fear, just know that you may be loosening up some of those memories. Doesn't matter what they are, or they're not going to affect you right now, you're just letting them go. And that's why we're doing this practice, right, is to learn and let things go. So as we get started today, we're going to start in down dog. So coming into down dog, hands are shoulder distance apart, feet are hip distance apart, and we're just going to bend the knees, come up onto the balls of the toes, balls of the feet, back down again, just bending the knees up and down. So feeling the feet, feeling the ankles, feeling your knees, taking some deep breaths, just warming up. And now we're going to bend one knee, pressing the other heel toward the floor. And here, with your mind's eye, you're going to look for this left hip joint that's pressing back. Little softness in the knee, and switch sides. So right heel goes toward the floor, it may or may not touch. Soften the knee, little looseness in the knee, and feel there where the thigh bone connects into the hip as that moves back.
Both heels toward the ground, soft knees, lengthen the spine. Breath in, extend the spine long, as if it had a possibility to extend through the top of the head, and then extend the tailbone way back behind you into the corner of the room. Deep breath. Let's come down onto the knees and begin some cat-cow, repositioning the hands so that the hands are right under the shoulders. Breathing in, arching the back. Breathing out, curling the back. Back and forth with your breath. Breath in cat, breath out cow. And hip circles. Moving the hips in big circles. Over to the side, back to the heel, and forward. And feel, again, with the mind's eye, proprioception, feeling the body position. Where's the left thigh bone, the left hip joint, the right thigh bone, the right hip joint, as you move through these slow circles. You're welcome to stop at any place as you circle through if that feels good, and remember to change direction at some time that you go in the other circular direction. Deep, full breath. Good. We're going to come into a twist, sliding the right arm down, shoulder to the floor, head to the shoulder, or head to your shoulder and the floor. You can move the left hand wherever it helps. You're going to take the right hip joint and move it way over to the left. Just place the left hand wherever it feels good. And we're twisting. This left shoulder starts to move back. Maybe your head turns a bit. Deep breath. And release, and switch sides. So now the left hip joint moves over to the left. Right shoulder moves up and back. Placing the right hand wherever it feels comfortable to help you twist. And releasing. Coming back into down dog. Deep breath, Ujjayi breathing. Coming into that ocean breath, if you know that. We'll use that throughout class. Deep, full diaphragmatic breathing. Long extension of the spine. And the mind's eye is going to stay exploring where exactly is the left hip joint, the right hip joint, and the sacrum, fitting into iliac crest of the pelvis, the very base. Walking the feet forward to the hands, Uttanasana, forward bend. Hands can be on blocks, the floor, or your shins, but let's put the hands on something, rolling the shoulders back, shoulder blades go toward the hips. And we're going to rock. Rocking on the feet, forward and back. Moving with the breath. Breath in one direction, breath out in the other. and release. Bending the knees, forearms to the thighs, coming into short stop position. Lengthen the back. So we're gonna play here of finding where exactly is the hip joint that I want to bend in any forward bending motion in the hip joint rather than the low back. So maybe you can stick your thumbs here in the joint that you feel. Where does that bend happen? That's where the joint is for the hip itself. Perhaps you put a hand onto the sacrum, that you feel that the two sides are even, parallel to the floor. One side isn't higher than another, and you know where the sacrum is here. So as you play around with where to put your hands, either in the hip joints, on the sacrum, or forearms on the thighs, we're going to extend the hips up toward the sky. Let the head hang, let the spine hang. Deep, full breath. Coming back into short stop position, forearms on the thighs. Round the spine. So notice the feeling here in the low back as that rounds. Sometimes we have a habit of bending from the low back rather than the hip joint. So that's one of the things we're practicing, is how can we get out of not bending here in the low spine, but instead bending in the hip joint. So round the spine and see what that feels like. That's a different place in the body, the lower back versus your hip joint. And just go back and forth a couple times between having that flat back through the lumbar spine, lower back, versus the rounded back. And notice what works. Back muscles versus leg and hip muscles in those two positions. Eventually find your way into your low back rounded position. We're going to roll through the spine, walk the hands up the body. We're just stretching the back here. Rolling up, deep breath in and release down. Let's take a standing breath, breathing in and reach. And breath out. Eyes closed. Feel the feet on the floor, the ankles, the knees. Relax the knees. Mind's eye for a lot of our class today, as your eyes are closed or open, mind's eye is going to be here in these hip joints. Right hip joint, left hip joint, and the sacrum. First, finding the bones, finding where they connect together in a joint. And then becoming aware that there's flesh in between those. There is flesh, organs, skin, blood vessels, muscles, tendons, ligaments, nerves, lots of things between the right hip joint and the left hip joint and the sacrum. It may also be helpful for you to imagine a ball here on the inside. It can be any size, color, texture. And this ball connects into the right and the left hip joint and the inside edge of the sacrum. Good, and then you drop the ball down through the legs. Just drop a cord down, the grounding cord we've covered in other classes. So imagining the sphere, the cord dropping down to ground, and feeling however your body senses the inside of the sacrum, left hip joint, right hip joint.
Taking a deep breath in, reach out. And fold. Uttanasana, forward bend. We're going to bend just at the hip joint. It helps to bend the knees. Go slowly, flat back. Just at the hip joint to bend down. Hands come to blocks, your shins, the floor. You're always welcome to come into a half forward bend or a full forward bend. Good. Right leg steps back, high lunge. Blocks come to either side of your front foot. Roll the shoulders back. And we're going to play here in the left hip joint. The left hip joint moves back, and then it moves forward with your breath. So taking a breath in, we move the left hip joint back. Breath out, we move the left hip joint forward. So we might think about, oh, the knee is bending and then extending to become straight, but instead bring the mind's eye here to the hip joint itself, and that we're focused on moving the hip joint forward and back rather than the secondary tactic that enables that, which is bending your knee. Mind's eye stays on that left hip joint area. Back and forth with your breath, deep breath. Good. Block can change positions if you like. Right hand on your block. We're going to twist, coming into revolve triangle, Vibrata Trikonasana. So left hip joint moves back. So it goes back toward the right heel. You can extend the arm into the air or just have it rest on the hip, your choice. Whatever helps you to stretch and feel good about that. Deep breath or to increase your awareness. Breath in, extend the spine, and breath out, settle through both feet. And release. Bending the knee, coming down onto the floor. You're welcome to put a padding under your right knee if that helps. Coming into a low lunge, Anjaneyasana. Reposition your blocks so it's helpful to support you right under the shoulders. Both hips lean forward. So we're thinking about this left hip dropping down toward the floor. Both hips moving forward. Find the hip joints themselves. If you want, you can take your hands off the blocks and put them onto that little hook that you have there of the ASIS point of the pelvis and lean both sides forward. If you feel unstable there, please move the hands back to the blocks or to your front leg. Some people may prefer to do this pose holding onto a table or a chair. Deep breath. Every breath, the spine lengthens, extends. And every breath out, we relax, we settle down into the ground. Noticing the right hip joint and the left hip joint. And release. Coming into a knee plank. Long extension. We're going to come with some modifications back and forth here, moving both hip joints back toward your heels, and then moving the hips joints forward toward your wrists. Just go back and forth with the hip joints forward and back. Playing with the motion that we feel exactly where we bend in the hip joints. One more time. Back to a knee plank. If you wish, you can pick up the knees, coming into a full plank, your choice. Long extension and lower slowly, keeping the elbows close to the body, shoulders roll back, coming down for 8, 7,
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Lengthening the legs back so we have space here on the front of the hip. Fingertips off the mat. Bhujangasana Cobra. With your breath in, the back lifts. With your breath out, you relax and settle a bit. It might be a very tiny settling. It might be a big settling all the way to the floor, whatever feels good. The deep, full breath lifts you, and the breath out relaxes. Notice if you tense up in the hip area. Try to relax through the hip flexor in the front, the gluteus muscle in the back. Just allow the back muscles, erector spinae, to do their work. When the breath comes in and you lift, that the back works for this. We don't need to tense the legs. We don't need to tense the hips to do this pose. We're relaxing that area as a base. One more breath. And release. Hands come close to the lower ribs. Turn the toes under. We're going to stay on the knees, and with that breath in, lifting the whole back. Notice what happened with your hip flexors. We're going to pick up the knees, bending them just a little bit, and pivot right at the hip joint to move yourself back into down dog. Take your time with that. We're going to go back and forth a few times. Right hip joint, left hip joint moves forward, coming back into your plank, and then those hip joints move back again. Paying attention, mind's eye, that focused awareness in the hip joints themselves. Back and forth with your own breath, twice more. And then staying in down dog. Deep breath. Ujjayi, if you are using Ujjayi breath today. Right knee pulls all the way forward, coming into a high lunge. Blocks on either side of your foot, just under the shoulders. Long extension to start. Check that your front knee is over your ankle. And we're going to start to move this right hip joint. Moving the right hip joint back and the right hip joint forward. Mind's eye, investigating where exactly is my right hip joint. Moving that forward in space, moving that backward in space. The knee just happens to enable that by bending and straightening. Mind's eye on the right hip joint. Last breath. Repositioning your block if you wish, and twisting, coming into revolved triangle. Deep breath, so this right hip joint is moving back toward your left heel. You can put your hand on that hip joint and help direct it back a little bit more. We're twisting through the spine. The arm can reach open if you wish. Deep breath. lengthening as much space as you can through the spine and reaching that right hip joint back behind you. And release. Coming down to a low lunge. Anjaneyasana. Hands on your blocks that are right under the shoulders, and we're leaning the right hip joint forward and down toward the floor. That is the initial focus. Eventually you'll notice both hip joints, right and left, both settle down toward the floor and forward. You can always, again, take your fingers onto the hip joint area, ASIS point of the hip, thumb and back, and find the hip joint in the center between your two fingers. Welcome to place your hands back on the blocks or your leg or something else that's supportive. Deep breath, lengthen the spine. Deep breath out, settle. And release. Picking up your knees, stepping forward, Uttanasana, forward bend. Breath in, extend. Breath out, settle and fold. You can alternate between the half forward bend, Ardha Uttanasana, and the full forward bend, Uttanasana, if you wish. You're also welcome to just stay in one or the other. Mind's eye, noticing the hip joints. So as you go up and down, where does your body pivot to move? And releasing, bend the knees, hands to your thighs. We're going to have a flat back to come up this time. So keeping the bend in the hip joint, not in the lower back. We breathe in, lift the back side of the heart. As we open up the hip joint, breathe in and reach. And release down. One standing breath. Just pause. Notice the knees and the hip joints and the low back especially. Notice your breath. Anything else that's happening here? Breathe in, reach up. Uttanasana, forward bend, using that method to only bend through the hip joints to fold. Taking your time as much as you need. Hands again can be on blocks or on your shins or on the floor. Blocks come to either side of your feet. Left leg steps back, high lunge. We're going to pivot the back foot flat. Reposition the front foot so that the heel intersects the back arch. We're going to come up, you're going to put your hand onto your right thigh to start with, and we're just going to hang out here for a little bit. Reposition the feet as much as you need to. Eventually, this right thigh will get parallel to the floor. We're going to reposition the body so that we're directly in the center, so shoulders are right over your hip joints. Again, you can use your fingers and find the hip joints. right in the center, balancing. You can do little pulses if you wish, deep full breath. Coming into warrior two. Shoulders roll back, find the hip joints. And now start to find the sacrum, that triangular bone in between in the back. And allow the sacrum to drop down toward the floor and be balanced right in between those two right and left hip joints. See if one's higher or lower than the other. Try to get them to be even with the sacrum right in between. Left hand reaches towards your left leg. Lean back, reverse warrior. Deep breath. Release. We're going to come back and find that balanced position again of right and left hip joints. Finding that with your mind's eye, sensing that body awareness, getting them exactly even with the sacrum in between. Warrior two, Virabhadrasana 2. Forearm to your thigh, side angle pose, Parsvakonasana. So reaching, this is a side stretch. We're reaching from the left heel outside of that foot through this whole left side. That's a nice stretch. But see if you can think about moving the spine, stretching the spine. So from the tip of the sacrum through the whole spine, extending through the top of the head. And again, notice right and left hip joints and that they're even. So move your leg as you need to get the right and left hip joints even. And release. We're going to bring the hand toward the floor, pivot your foot and come forward and fold. Bend the knees a little bit. Your head may or may not touch the floor. Depends on your limb length. My head usually does, a lot of people's don't. If your head does not, you're going to take a block and put it under your head. You can put the block on high or on low, whatever works for your body. But you're going to put the head on something, floor or block. Bend the knees as much as you like, and you're focusing mind's eye on these hip joints. Again, if it helps you, you can stick your fingers into the hip joints between the flesh of the hip and the flesh of your thigh. Relax through both feet. Feel the whole foot settling down, the outside, the inside. And release. Hands to your thighs, bend your knees, flat back to come up, staying, keeping that hip joint bent as you come up. Big breath in. And release down. I'm going to pivot the foot again. Coming into triangle pose. So block is outside your right shin, right hand on your block, your shin or the floor, and extend. So for this one, the hips are not parallel to the floor. Let's move the right hip joint forward. Deep full breath, and make yourself really long from the sacrum. Pull the spine long. Deep breath. That breath comes in, opens up the space between the shoulder joints, fills the space of the ribs under the shoulder blades as well as in the front. And release. Bending the knee, coming to the floor, coming into a plank, Kumbhakasana, on your knees or on your toes. And lowering slowly. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1.
Lengthening the legs back, feet are flat on the floor, interlace the hands. Notice which finger you have on top. Lengthen, breathe in. The spine lifts, breathe out, settle closer to the floor a little. 4 more breaths. Notice your tendency, your habit in the hip area, in the gluteus muscles, in the thighs. Relax those muscles. Mind's eye as you breathe, lifting and lowering. Mind's eye is on the hip joints and the sacrum. Releasing the hands, and just rest on the floor for a moment. Turning the toes under. This time we're going to lift the hip joints up. So as you breathe in, lift the hip joints. It's a little motion. And then release it down. Do that twice more. The hip joints and sacrum lift. Good. We're going to do that again, and this time press on the hands so that the back lifts at the same time. Giving you a straighter plank as you come up. Coming back into down dog. Notice the weight on the right hand. Press the whole hand down. Open up all the fingers. Notice the left hand. Push the whole left hand down, opening the fingers. Balance between the right and left hands. Deep, full breath, as if you could also see your shoulder joints and the space between them gets bigger because you're breathing into the space between them. Little bend in the knees, leaning the sacrum further back behind you, as if you could sit on the wall, or as if you had a tail, like a poinsettia, the dog that extends all the way into the corner of the room. Keeping the left foot on the floor, right leg comes up. 3-legged dog, again balancing weight between right and left sides on the shoulders and hands. Long extension between the left shoulder joint and your right hip joint, that diagonal line from the inside of the body, from each joint. Lengthen that space, then bend the knee, and you can twist in the lower part of the body for 3-legged dog. Release that side. Other side, left leg lifts, and we're starting just long and straight first. Balance between right and left shoulder. Find the right shoulder joint and reach, extend to the left hip joint, diagonal line, making that as long as you can. Bending the knee and twisting a little more the lower part of the body. And release. Feet onto the floor, knees onto the floor. Balasana, child's pose. Coming up, down dog. Left leg reaches forward. Blocks on either side. First, starting off in your long lunge, and we spin the back foot flat. Reposition the front foot. So again, we have the heel intersecting with the arch. We're going to come up into the middle. And find again, Hands come to back side of the low back, the hip, fingers on the IS points, and notice if one hip is higher than the other, and try to even that out. Just keeping centered. Shoulders right over the hip joints. First, just centering. Finding the sacrum, dropping straight down into the floor, that all three joints are even, in line and centered. Virabhadrasana 2, Warrior 2. Deep breath. Right hand comes to the leg, reverse warrior. Notice again, right and left hip joints, the sacrum, where are they in relation to each other? Practicing, exploring body awareness. And release back to warrior 2. If you need to, release the hands, come back, find right and left hip joints, and find yourself in an even, balanced position. Forearm onto the thigh, side angle pose, Parsvakonasana. Adjust your feet as needed to give yourself support. Shoulder blades pull toward the hips. First extend outside of the right foot through the whole side, 2 fingers, but then also finding tailbone and sacrum and extending through your spine as long as you can through the spine. Deep breath. And releasing. Moving the block, pivoting your feet, folding forward, reposition the feet, toes going in the same direction, and fold. Prasarita Padottanasana. Little bend in the knee, bending at the hip joint. Bend your knees as much as you need to so that you really can get the bend into the hip joints. Find the sacrum and allow your head to hang. Remember that you can put your head on the floor or on a block, but to give yourself some extra support through the spine today. Bending your knees, hands come to your thighs, flat back to come up. Stay with the bend in the hip joint as you come up. Left foot repositions, we're coming into triangle pose. Block is outside of your left shin. And here, the hips are not in the same place, right? The right hip is higher than the left hip joint, but find the left hip joint, move it forward. Deep full breath, lengthen the spine, that tailbone reaches, sacrum reaches directionally toward the right heel, and the spine just gets really long. Keep breathing. And release. Stepping forward, Uttanasana, forward bend. Two or three breaths here. Bending the knees, hands to thighs. We're going to roll up this time. Tuck the tailbone and roll through the spine to come up. Breath in, the spine gets long. Breath out, settle. Sacrum, both hip joints, through the grounding cord and into the floor. Mind's eye, right hip joint, left hip joint, the inside of the sacrum. Imagine as if there's little lines like a triangle that connect them. Perhaps it's a sphere that connects them. And imagining that triangle, the sphere, the spiral, dropping down between the legs and into the ground. The ground. Good. Release the hands. We're going to do a couple standing poses that are stationary. So we're going to start off on the left leg and cross the right ankle over, flexing the foot. We're going to lean at the hip joint. So notice that my back is straight and we're coming down slowly. You can put one hand on your knee and the other on your foot if that helps. You can have hands together in prayer if that feels good. But you're going to come down as far as you can, but keep the back flat, not rounding in the low back. Lean the hip joints further back. Some people may have hands on the floor. Some people might put hands on blocks. These are also choices. More advanced people will hook the foot around the shoulder and come onto the hands and lay the shin across the back of your arms, across the triceps. So you can just hang out here in this stretch. For those that want to come up and do balance practices, you're welcome to pick up that foot. But we're stretching that hip joint here. One more breath. And release. Release the foot to the floor, hands to the thighs, roll up. Good. Feel the difference in the two thighs, in the hip area. Good. Coming on to the right leg, same game. And for those that would like to try it with the blocks again, weight on your right leg, cross the left leg over, the foot is flexed. Lean the hip joints back, keeping a flat back. And again, the hand can be on the foot and the knee. You can hold the hands together in prayer. You can put the hands on blocks. All of these are options. And some people may put fingertips on the floor, hook the foot around the shoulder, or practice the balance. So moving in toward Galavasana. But focusing more on the stretch through the hip joint. Deep full breath. Releasing the foot to the floor, hands to thighs, flat back up. Let's do a standing breath. Breathe in, reach up. Good. We're returning to the left leg. So many ways that you can do this, whatever works for your body. Some people may have a strap. I find it's just easier to hold on to my knee. So you're balancing on the left leg and notice that your right hip joint is bending. And so we want to drop that right hip down. So you can hold on with your left hand or your right to hold on to the knee. Either one's fine. You can also not hold on at all and just play there. You can extend the leg, bring it back. All of these are options. Some people may bring the knee a little higher when we do that, we tend to lift and hike up that right hip joint, and we're still going to try to keep that down. Just balancing. With your leg in your hand or without a hand, move the knee to the side. We're going to just let the foot dangle. Breath in, lengthen the spine, and ground. So from those two hip joints, find that they're even and ground. Bringing the foot to your leg. Careful not to press on the inside of the knee, but get it onto your thigh or onto your shin. And tree pose. Do whatever you like. You can hold a tray, prayer, arms up. All of these are options for tree. And release. Shake the leg out if you need to. Shifting weight onto the right. Notice where your hip joints are. Mind's eye on the hip joint. Find the hip joint. As we lift the left leg, again, tendency is to hike up this hip. We're keeping the hip down and level. You can hold on with a hand if that helps. You can play with extending the leg. Deep breath. Two hands if you like. Lifting the knee. Deep breath. Long extension of the spine. Breathe in. The spine lifts. Breathe out. We're settling. Finding those two hip joints. Finding the sacrum and the flesh around that area and grounding that down. The leg is going to move to the side. Just dangle the foot to start. Again, you're welcome to hold on to the leg. As you're ready, bring the foot to the leg. It can come onto the thigh or onto your calf. Ground, feel into those joints. The tree can take any form. Wide hands, coming in with hands, up, deep breath. Notice the hip joints. Breathe. And release. Walking around a little bit, coming to the floor. We're going to come into pigeon. Right leg is first. So I got up in the middle of the night last night with lots of pain in my sacrum, which is why we're doing this class today. And normally I have my hip on the floor, but not when I'm injured. So if you are less flexible or injured, you put a blanket or a pillow or something like that to give you height. A block would also work underneath your hip. Okay? So breath in, lengthen this leg out behind you. Now you have some awareness of where the hip joint is and where your ankle is. Line those up. You can turn and look, but see if you can feel it. Use your proprioception of where is my foot, the arch, the ankle, where there's the left hip joint, and put that in a straight line behind you. Then coming down to the floor, you can stop at the forearms, you can come all the way to the floor, your choice. Deep breath. Breath in, the spine extends. Breath out, we relax. Especially when we're tight in the hip area, it's hard to relax. It's hard to even realize that we're clenching, that we're gripping that area. And this practice of becoming aware of exactly where is my right hip joint in relation to my sacrum also helps us notice little tiny details that we might be holding, literally the leg. See if you can let that go, that tension, that gripping feeling, and allow it to just seep into the ground.
Releasing, coming up, placing your hand on the floor. For some people, a fist may feel more comfortable on the wrist. You're gonna grab the heel. If you have on longer pants, you can grab your pants. Some people will grab the inside of the foot, and you're gonna bring, however you bring your foot, closer to your hip. More advanced people will bring the fingers over the toes. Breath in, extend. Breath out, settle. Notice, where is my left hip joint? Where is my right hip joint? And am I gripping? Am I holding? Releasing that. And let go. Coming on to hands and knees. Knees under the hips, hands under the shoulders. And just pause. Feet flat. Just feel into the sacrum and both hip joints. And release. Other side, left leg comes forward. And again, some people may be using a block or a blanket under the hip. And starting off tall with that leg supported. Finding with your mind's eye your right hip joint, the inside of your ankle and your arch, and line up your leg. You can close your eyes. What we're practicing isn't just stretching. We're learning body awareness, finding details, and it just comes with practice. Right hip joint, line that up with the inner ankle and the inside of your right arch. Good. And now fold forward. Deep breath. And relax. Mind's eye on the left hip joint. Notice what, where there's gripping, a point of tension. See if you can let that run as if it were water, like the stream runs. And ground. Sometimes when we let things go, it needs to go somewhere. So let's let that ground. Good. Releasing, come up. Left hand on the floor, or making a fist if that's better for your wrist. Grabbing to bring the heel closer to your hip. Notice where your right and left hip joints are and the sacrum in between. See if you can become even with those, leveling them. Deep breath. Release. And coming off your blanket if you're on one. We're coming into Bridget's cross. So I'm gonna flip to both sides so you can see. Let your left foot, put that straight out in front of you. You're gonna lean to your left side. The right leg goes back behind you. So you could just lay on the side and the foot is on the side. But what I'd like to have us do is take this right hip point and bring it down towards your inner left thigh. So your body turns to face the floor. For some people, this is very difficult. So you may need to put the knee down or bend the knee, okay? But if you can, try to keep the legs straight, and we're gonna flex this foot. It's very important that your left foot be flexed, and then press through the heel and the ball of the foot, as if you're pressing your foot onto a wall. Breath in, extend the spine, and breath out, settle down. For people that are more limber, you can lay your chest onto the floor and grab your foot and turn your head the other way. Deep breath. Releasing, pressing yourself up and coming to seated with both legs straight out. Just put one hand on either side and pause, Dandasana. Feel the difference in your legs, back, hips, belly, neck, face. And breathe. Other side. Right leg stays out. Lean to your right side, the left leg comes behind. And remember, you can always leave it so that you're just on your side of your foot. If possible, come onto the toes. Position your belly and chest to face the floor. Breath in, spine extends. Breath out, settle into the ground. Remember to flex the right foot and press the foot as if you're pressing into a wall. For those who wish, belly to the floor, hand to your foot, turn your head away. Deep breath. And releasing. And coming onto your back. Feet are flat on the floor, hip distance apart, and you have an option here to do a bridge pose or wheel pose. So for bridge pose, Setulandasana, feet are about hip distance apart and your fingers will just about touch the heels. Coming onto the shoulder blades, tucking the shoulders under, first start off and lifting the hips. If you want, now is a good time to touch the ASIS point of the hip. Where is that point? And come up and down a little bit that you know where's the hip joint as I'm moving up and down. Do I favor one side more than the other? Is one side easier? And then notice the sacrum in the middle and lift the sacrum up and down. Notice that sometimes, so for me now, because I have injured my sacroiliac joint, for me to press up here hurts. So I want to release that, giving a little more bend in the hip flexors here in the hip joint. And I extend the sacrum long as if it goes between my legs. So I'm lengthening the low back. So if I press up, this hurts because I'm pressing in, tightening the gluteus muscles, and I'm pressing into that sacroiliac joint. But if I loosen that, so loose gluteus muscles, and then extend the spine long, that feels okay. So you can play with that for your own body awareness. as you come down, articulate the spine. One vertebra comes down at a time. So that means you do round the lower back and support yourself as you come down. I'd like you to do that one more time on your own. So you can do Setu Bandhasana, the bridge pose again, and play around with feeling and movement through right and left hip joints, keeping that level and noticing what happens in the sacroiliac joint. For other people that would like more, we're going to come into Urdhva Dhanurasana in wheel pose, positioning the hands on either side of your ears, coming on to the top of the head, and then wait. So from here, loosen the legs again, so you're not clenching so much in the gluteus muscles. See if you can loosen that. Knees are right over the ankles, elbows in line with the shoulders, in line with the wrists, and just weight on top of the head until you feel that your hips are even, sacrum in between is not stressed. Then push up. Deep, full breath. And release. And come down, articulating the spine, whatever position you've been in. Coming into a windshield wiper, rocking the knees side to side. And as you rock, we do this pose so often, and that rocking motion is really helpful for calming us. Patterning it with the breath, especially helpful. But notice as you move here side to side, what happens in the hip joints. So when you press the knee away, what is happening in that hip joint? Are you able to get more space through it, for example? So checking for space, separating between the leg and the torso. What is the position right and left is another thing you can look at. You can also look at positioning of the sacrum. Where is my sacrum in relation to the right hip joint or the left hip joint? So you're exploring here. It's not only stretching and following some habit. We're looking into the case today, just now, what's happening in the body. And releasing that, coming into Baddha Konasana, soles of the feet together. And if this is difficult for you, if this is painful, please put a blanket under your knees or a block so that that doesn't hurt. Some people, this will feel good stretching, and you don't have anything under the knees, and you let this open. Again, here, potential for putting pressure onto the sacroiliac joint is possible. So feel your sacrum on the floor. Feel the right and left hip joints. So the joint, we find that Ayas points these knobs on the hip, and about an inch below, 1.5 meters, these spongy hip flexors, in there is the hip joint. You can play. And releasing. Last pose we will have today. You're welcome to do any others on your own, of course, but we're going to put a block lengthwise under the sacrum, so it supports the sacrum and the hip joints. And if this feels more comfortable for you to use a bolster or a blanket, please do that. So the knees stay bent, You place the feet so that the legs have no need to work, that they are relaxed. Tucking the shoulder blades under, palms are open toward the ceiling, and we rest. Let your belly get really soft so it rounds easily when you breathe. You can imagine as if the skin and the flesh of your body in your lower back and hips and legs just oozes over the block or your blanket, almost like honey, just drips over it. And bringing the mind's eye for the 100th time inside the right hip joint, the left hip joint, and the edges of your sacrum and the inner edge of it. Imagining your picture of it, a sphere, a triangle. At any time, you're welcome to take the block away and come into Shavasana, or just hang out here for another minute or so and relax. Deep, full breath. Please stay in Shavasana as long as you like. For those who are ready, we're going to take a deep breath and possibly move the legs a little bit, that windshield wiper pose. And in your mind's eye, noticing with much more awareness than when we started class, what's happening in the hip joints and in the sacrum. Feeling gratitude, thank you to this part of the body that does so much to support daily activity and function. Thank you to this part of the body for all that you do. And ground. These lines, these points connecting into the soil, helping us to stay stable, secure. As you're ready, you can roll to your side, supporting your head with your arm. Keeping your hips loose, your spine loose. Use your arms to press yourself up to seated. Deep, full breath. Eyes closed. And just feeling this part of the body, the hip joints, how close they are to the floor, the sacrum, this balancing point in between, this long, graceful spine that you have, relaxing the shoulders back. And thank you for making this practice part of your life, benefiting yourself and all those around you. Namaste.